Hi, I'm Alex Williams of the New Stack with our series of interviews from the OpenStack Summit in Austin, Texas, brought to you by GoDaddy. GoDaddy is transforming itself with the development of a new stack infrastructure and an OpenStack service for its legions of small business customers. Learn more at GoDaddy.com. Hey, it's Alex Williams of the New Stack here at OpenStack. Another day here. And we are starting our podcast this morning with the Cloud Foundry team. Here with my co-host here at the New Stack, Joab Jackson, managing editor.
Hello.
Chip Childers of the Cloud Foundry group, Cloud Foundry Foundation.
Yep.
Get that right.
Hello.
And Abby Kearns of Cloud Foundry.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I feel like I've been up for hours. It's at least afternoon, right?
That is awesome. So I want to ask you guys about, OpenStack, and I think of Cloud Foundry as, a platform, right? And we're seeing a lot of kind of discussions about OpenStack, working with different platform frameworks. What is it that we should be thinking about when we're thinking about Cloud Foundry and OpenStack? I mean, we're hearing a lot about other platforms too, and there's Kubernetes out there, and there's, we talk about Mesos integrations. Give us the insight on Cloud Foundry's integration.
Well, the combination of Cloud Foundry and OpenStack allow you to create an open cloud platform, from the infrastructure up to the cloud application platform. And it allows you to encapsulate all of the feature functionality you need to deploy your apps. So not just containers and container scheduling, container management, but all of the health management, the health monitoring, the logs, all of the feature functionality you need as an enterprise to run an open cloud platform.
So I think that what's interesting, Abby's dead on, but I believe that what is really interesting that we've seen is the enterprise is obviously not just going with one infrastructure solution. There's a lot of people who are certainly using OpenStack for on-prem or within their own data centers, but a lot of those same enterprises are also using Amazon, they're using Google, they're using Azure, and so we really live in this world that's a bit more of a multi-cloud. Hybrid used to be the term where it was public and private, but it's more of a multi-cloud world. And so while Cloud Foundry needs to work really, really well with on-prem solutions like OpenStack, it also needs to work really well with all of the other platforms that are out there. So to us, it's really important that we continue to focus on being a multi-cloud, polyglot platform for applications. That make sense?
Yeah, could you expand a bit more into that? A multi-cloud, how would I use it in a Cloud Foundry in a multi-cloud way? I developed something on Cloud Foundry to run in-house. Can I also transfer that over to a cloud service?
Absolutely.
Huh.
So Cloud Foundry is great because it's a distributed system in and of itself, and it's specifically designed to be able to be deployed onto any number of infrastructure as a service platforms, right? So it will take advantage of the aspects of an IaaS that are actually more commoditized, right? So it's basic compute, basic networking, some volume management for storage, and then an object store. That's basically what is at the heart of all of these large clouds, including OpenStack, right? So that's those are kind of the commoditized infrastructure components that exist everywhere. And so CF can, via plugins, talk to the Google Compute Engine, it can talk to AWS, it can talk to the OpenStack APIs in order to provision itself into that environment. Once you're in that environment, you have consistency of experience because Cloud Foundry is Cloud Foundry, and it works the same regardless of how the underlying infrastructure is configured or which choice you made.
So I can move my Cloud Foundry app over between Amazon and, say, IBM Bluemix, and it'd be a fairly easy operation to do.
Well, I'd say I would liken it more between, I can move my workloads between AWS, GCP, Azure, OpenStack, vSphere, and have the consistent experience. And going back to consistency, and I think that's the true value of an abstraction, right? Is my developer has the same experience irrespective of the underlying infrastructure. It's able. It doesn't have to. He doesn't have to. He or she doesn't have to change or rewrite their application for the environment. It's as simple as retargeting where that app is deployed. And the operator also has the same consistent experience, irrespective of the infrastructure. So it makes, as an organization, it gives me optionality on my cloud platform. It gives me a choice, as well as the ability to change that and iterate on that over time, or based on workload. It gives you so much optionality as an organization that now I'm not really tied in to a specific infrastructure provider or a predictive data center.
Nice.
And so, who are the companies that you're seeing doing this now, and how are they preparing themselves internally to do this? It's a story that we're interested in, is like these companies that are going through transformations. I think Allstate is a good example of that, right?
Allstate, I mean, all of the companies that are adopting and leveraging Cloud Foundry are leveraging it as a tool to really kickstart that digital transformation. So, I think Mark Andreessen really coined it best in 2011, where he said software is eating the world. And now we're seeing all of these large Fortune 500, Global 2000 companies that are now coming to the table saying we're now software companies. And a platform like Cloud Foundry gives them that ability to become a software company quickly, deliver and drive that velocity that they're looking for, as well as giving an operational agility that they don't have today with traditional stacks.
So it's like a software development and deployment platform for the enterprise specifically.
I wouldn't say for the enterprise specifically.
Mm-hmm.
So we do talk a lot about large enterprises, because I think that, well, one, there is a lot of focus in making sure that the Fortune 500, the Global 2000 companies can make the transitions, and that's kind of a whole line of thinking that we can go down around how, if you have a ton of resources available to you, why are you being beaten by smaller, less resourced organizations, right? So what can you do to be more effective? However, if you look at our whole market, if you include the providers like CenturyLink's AppFog or IBM Bluemix, they're absolutely supporting small and medium businesses, startups that just want a simple way to focus on writing the business logic for whatever problem they're trying to solve and releasing the app as quickly as possible. So while typically it would be a larger organization that would install their own version of Cloud Foundry, use of online services that are based on Cloud Foundry as well is pretty common in the small business space.
Yeah, absolutely. Good point. It's not an enterprise-only problem. I think we're looking at this across the entire business spectrum. Everyone is trying to develop software faster, quicker, and either maintain or build relevance in a marketplace that is changing and changing quickly. And I think this gives every organization, irrespective of size, the ability to have that agility.
So all these different cloud service providers have different ways of running their infrastructure, and we're seeing the emergence of this new, this new stack of storage, this new stack of networking. It's a topic we're interested here, following a Cloud Foundry summit. I'm curious about, how does Cloud Foundry adapt to these, to these changing architectures that we're starting to see emerge?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. So first, I'd say that Cloud Foundry actually has been leading a lot of the change in terms of industry thinking around containerization, right? So for example, our container story is that Cloud Foundry had containers before Docker was a term, right? It was a feature of the platform. Mm-hmm. It was use of Linux kernel features that needed to provide effective isolation.
The platforms, as the service providers, have been developing container
for a long
capabilities
time, right?
for a long time.
Absolutely. And what we're really excited about, though, are while the rest of the industry kind of caught up and a lot of commercial activity started to happen around that layer. We've seen a lot of architectural changes in how people think about running data centers and writing applications because of this. However, the standardization process is now really starting to become valuable. So the work at OCI we think is great. Cloud Foundry is currently in the process of adopting RunC, which is the runtime library at OCI. We're very excited about the container image format work that's just kicked off there, because while it's interesting to talk about exactly what process is going to run the container, it's much more interesting to talk about what's the image going to look like when you're going to move it from one platform to another. We also like to take advantage of a lot of the ecosystem activity that's occurring around networking and storage. So we've got project teams right now that are focused specifically on how do we deal with service to service or microservice to microservice or even just container to container networking, taking advantage of the CNI, container
Right.
networking interface. And we have a persistence project that's looking at what had been traditionally the realm of, so our Elastic runtime layer was traditionally designed around stateless ephemeral applications, and state was stored somewhere else. Although as we continue to be adopted in more companies, there are use cases where you need to actually have some type of local file system available. And so we're looking at the Docker Volume plugin as a way to work with a big ecosystem there. And we're hopeful that we can actually take that initial Docker Volume plugin API and find ways to work with the industry to expand it a bit so it actually solves for more complex platform-based cases.
So you brought up the CNI, for example, but there's lots of distributed control plane environments. And there's OVF, for example. Docker has his own, take on it. Do you have to develop architectures for each one of those and adapt them accordingly?
So we don't, right? We very much think in terms of layers of abstraction and making sure that we're relying on standardized or at least very clear APIs for the things that are underneath our application platform. So in an example, let's forget about container level networking. Our ability to deploy the same platform and operate the same way consistently across OpenStack and Amazon is because we have a very clear set of specific needs that we have for the infrastructure. And so that abstraction layer works really well for us. Now, when we talk about container to container networking, we can also rely on things like CNI to be very effective at working with different SDNs that are tied into it. Make sense?
Yeah, I mean it's just such an early. It's so young, and there's definitely lines in the sand being drawn, right, about who supports what, right? So we have, there's just different takes on it, and so I mean I'm curious on how platforms like Cloud Foundry adapts these different to these changes.
Well, I think Cloud Foundry, and that's the greatest part and the greatest outcome of it being an open source community driven platform, is that it has the ability to evolve and innovate at a pace that is not tied to a single company or a single customer. And so we have over 60 organizations now part of the Cloud Foundry community, all of which are bringing their own perspective, their own customers' perspective to the table to say how should this platform continue to evolve as the customer's needs evolve. I think where we stand now and where we stand 2 years from now will be completely different, as more and more of these organizations are really building and implementing true pipelines that are really achieving significant amounts of velocity in terms of application development. Their expectations are going to be vastly different 2 years from now because they're going to need different things.
Are you finding a rough consistency, though, among your largest users about the direction forward, though? Or is it more like you're trying to avoid deadlock in terms of strategizing where the platform will go in the future?
I think I don't think we're trying to actively avoid deadlock. I think at this point we're trying to say is what does the platform need to evolve? As Chris, our ship, talked about the persistent storage. I mean, that was something not on the original roadmap and things like that. And I think as we continue to evolve, different things will bubble up that are going to be important to customers and end users based on what they're trying to achieve. And I think as application development matures, and as the expectations for those end applications differ, I think their expectations of a platform are going to be very different as well. I do think if you're adopting a platform like Cloud Foundry with the expectations, I'm going to have a speed to market, I'm going to have a velocity around my development process, and I'm going to have operational agility, then one of the things that are often talked about are 12-factor app-based methodologies, and really architecting your applications for that level of resiliency and expecting an immutable infrastructure underneath that. And I think as that process evolves and becomes much more common, we'll see expectations change on the underlying data and infrastructure.
Yeah, I think a key to what Abby was saying is that while expectations are going to change over time, I would say that the Cloud Foundry community and ecosystem tries not to get distracted by the latest shiny object. I mean, when we talk about our users, we're talking truly about leaders in industry, right? So whether we're talking about the industrial, the heavy industry space, General Electric, Siemens, Bosch, they're all reinventing their business based on Cloud Foundry. We can talk about the automotive industry with Daimler, Ford, who else, right? We're hitting all of these major organizations who are going through a transformation. They've got real revenue on the line. They've got real business processes on the line. While innovation is really, really important to how we collectively as an industry move forward, the Cloud Foundry community tends to have a bit of a filter that is a very practical one. That says, let's not get distracted. Let's actually ensure that any of the work that we're doing is directly aligned to providing the best platform experience so that the businesses can get on with the business of creating business value. That was a lot of words to say business there.
And so how are you then working with the other open source communities then? So there's the Cloud Native Computing Foundation, there's OCI, there's and all of these different organizations have different interests. I'm curious on that story about how open source communities are not just like developing their own environments, but they have thinking like how they work across, with other like-minded communities.
Well, absolutely. Our goal is to do more of that and build out our ecosystem, not just even in the Linux Foundation community with OCI and CNCF, but even bridging that with the Eclipse Foundation. For example, we have an industrial IoT special interest group that we run, and the community around that leverages both the technology within Cloud Foundry, but Eclipse Foundation has over 21 IoT working projects right now. So building a bridge and connecting those aspects are things we want to focus on this year, and really looking at all of the technology that's out there in the ecosystem and how do we really build a bridge to make that and create the best experience.
So building a bridge, what does that mean?
It means being aware of the other communities, actively engaging in conversation with them, talking about ideas and requests that come up in your community and how those are best addressed in the ecosystem.
How does that play out then?
I'll give you a concrete example. So a good concrete example would be exactly the story that Abby was telling about the Eclipse Foundation. There are companies in heavy industry who have decided that CF is their platform and are creating easily deployable reference architecture for what an industrial internet backplane would look like by packaging Eclipse projects. And they've also created some new Eclipse projects specifically to plug holes in that total architecture that they had whiteboarded. And they're ensuring that the whole thing operates as a consistent unit. That's one example. But we could also talk about work with OCI. So as we adopt Run C, the engineers on Cloud Foundry projects are directly engaging with the engineers that build Run C. We are pretty hopeful about a couple other areas of collaboration with CNCF and OCI in the future.
Such as?
I can hint at some right now, but let's just say the market needs to be really big for services.
Okay.
To switch topics, you guys, Cloud Foundry Summit is coming up in a short
23rd to 25th.
I'm glad she remembered.
We're counting down the days.
So who is coming, and what will be the major topics of discussion there?
All the cool kids are coming. We're super excited. This is going to be the biggest one yet. So we're expecting over 2,000 attendees to come and talk about the Cloud Foundry community.
Good for you. Good for you.
And it should be a great mix of users. We have a lot of user stories, which we think is really, really important. But there's also a great opportunity for anyone that's either involved in the community as a user, or perhaps you're integrating with Cloud Foundry to directly interact with the core contributors, the core developers of the project. There are talks about the roadmaps. There are actual meet and greet sessions available for each one of the project teams. So it should be a lot of great collaboration. Also, a lot of good business will get done there.
And more than that, it's an opportunity, even if you're a prospective Cloud Foundry user or you're just curious about what a cloud application platform looks like, it's a good opportunity to see how other people are using it, talk to other peers in your industry. We will be hosting our industry special interest groups. Right now we have financial services, industrial IoT, and service providers. And those are open to both current Cloud Foundry user community as well as those that are potential that want to get involved. And we really want to encourage that community building, because I think where everyone is right now is as they're implementing and adopting Cloud Foundry, they're always curious, and I get asked a lot, well, what's so-and-so doing? How are they doing that? Is this equally hard for everyone as we're kind of undergoing this transformation? And I think having an opportunity to talk to your peers is an amazing opportunity as companies are trying to change the way they think about software.
Changing gears again, but first I do want to give a pitch that we are having a pancake breakfast at Cloud Foundry Summit, so we're all excited about that.
And Alex is promising to serve lemonade there.
Lemonade, pancake breakfast and lemonade. We can talk about more of that later.
We'll pull Devin over.
Yeah, we'll pull Devin over.
If you're
Devin,
curious about
lemonade.
the reference, you should show up for the pancake breakfast.
Yes, for sure. For sure. There will be entertainment for sure. And so, starring Devin, of course, right? You know.
Yeah, Devin Davis is an outstanding entertainer.
Thanks, Devin. Thank you. He's like, I don't know what you're talking about. So changing gears a little bit, I'm curious on what's the latest with Lattice. I'm always curious about, you know, these next generation kind of like architectures that are coming out of something like Cloud Foundry.
Yeah, so I think Lattice is
And help us help people
important
understand
story.
what Lattice is.
well, it's actually an important story because so Lattice is something that is not being maintained anymore, and that's okay because that was actually a specific experiment to take what was the next generation of the Cloud Foundry runtime, get it in people's hands early, and start to see it get used and scaled. We actually we learned a lot from that process. And so it now is, you know, of course you can still go get the bits, but it's not being actively maintained. The core new runtime for Cloud Foundry is now fully integrated into CF. It's called Diego. It is, the work of that team right now is moving towards 250,000 app instances as a scaling target by the end of this year. It's been rolled into production by some of our providers. It's been commercialized by distributors like Pivotal. So that's kind of where Lattice went. There is also work to try to figure out how to take the full Cloud Foundry experience, specifically that CF command line experience, and move it into a much more consumable kind of local environment to give it a try faster as a developer.
Like on a laptop?
Yeah, on a laptop. So one of the things we learned with Lattice was that it was an interesting experiment because it taught us how to kind of squeeze down the footprint of the runtime, but the user experience just wasn't the same as what the CF user experience is. And so that was a little bit confusing for end users, and so we took that as an opportunity to learn, kind of stood that project down. You know, it's still available if somebody wanted to pick it back up, but on the other hand, I think that the work to minify to make up a word, to minify the CF footprint overall, to make it easier to get started as a developer is perhaps more interesting.
Huh. So I thought it went from Diego to Lattice. I guess I was confused on that. It went from Lattice to Diego.
Yeah, so Lattice was a repackaging of the Diego in progress runtime, and as well as Logregator and the Go router for inbound traffic routing, repackaging via Terraform. That was it. Right, so it was more of just a repackaging, some marketing activity around it to get it in people's hands, see if we could learn anything from that process, and then we took all that learning back to the core Cloud Foundry platform.
Well, great. Well, thank you for spending some time with us. Here at OpenStack, at our little table here, and doing podcasts for the past 2 days. We can't wait to be at Cloud Foundry Summit and have some pancakes and lemonade.
Outstanding.
Looking forward to seeing you there.
Great. Well, thanks, Joab.